Hey, good evening, Cuse Nation. Welcome to the Upstate Orange Podcast on FingerLakes1.tv. Jim Sinacropi live inside the FingerLakes1.com studios in downtown Seneca Falls, New York on Sunday night, November 27th, 2016. And the Cuse shocked at the Barclays, losing 64-50 to the South Carolina Gamecocks. Last week, Brad and I talked about how the Orange might have been underranked at 18. Tonight, we have to wonder if they're not overrated. Tonight, we'll talk about it along as part of our Big Five topics and some great Orange trivia when we're joined by the Professor Brad Connor in Cincinnati, Ohio, live in just a moment. The Upstate Orange Podcast is brought to you by Generations Bank with locations in Auburn, Farmington, Phelps, Geneva, Seneca Falls, Union Springs, and Waterloo. Be sure to check out their mobile banking app or visit them online at mygenbank.com. And Brad, we really both agreed last week that the Orange was a little underrated at 18. I don't know if we feel the same way about that today after that South Carolina whooping, right? And it was a home game.
There's a reason why those guys are experts and we're just a bunch of guys doing a podcast, I guess.
I mean, it was a home game too at the Barclays. It was a big time.
That was a decided Syracuse crowd.
Yeah, so, let's get right to it now with the first of our Big Five topics of the night. And last week, we tried to figure out what this team's weakness was, and we struggled to really find one thing that really stood out because they had looked so dominant in their first four wins. But I think that we were a little exposed in a couple of places against South Carolina. So after that game now, what is this team's biggest weakness?
I'm not sure where to start. They got a lot more weaknesses than I think any of us realized when we were doing this a week ago. I mean, I think a couple things pop out at me. The first is the play of the big guys inside. I mean, this team was exposed for not having any answers offensively or defensively. South Carolina scored only 64 points, but I felt they the zone inside with a lot of really good that we hadn't seen that. And let's be clear. I mean, South Carolina is a different caliber team than anybody these guys have played. Yeah. So they're a better coach. They have athletes. They play at a higher level. So there's reason to think that they would have had an easier time with it. But there was just very little resistance, I thought, with a lot of the interior passing. When they had the guys or the in, Syracuse just didn't really have any answers, and the shooting was poor, and that's going to come and go. But I think what we realized is this team, like it or not, this team is built around three-point shooting and outside shooting, and it's a driving kick. It's NBA-style basketball, and this team, when the shots aren't falling, there aren't a whole lot of answers offensively.
Yeah, when we thought about the fact that there's just so many options that the shots are going to be falling one way or another because somebody's going to be hot. But yeah, against that tough, unorthodox South Carolina defense, I think it was a wake-up call for our younger guys. But I agree in the fact that the biggest weakness on this team is in the middle, both offensively and defensively. Roberson, Shikwu, and Coleman, not too impressive. And that could be a reoccurring issue as we face bigger and better teams like Wisconsin coming up. So I guess
I don't understand how, as a senior, Tyler Roberson can literally disappear to the degree that he does and that he did the other day. I mean, you barely even knew he was on the floor. I mean, he had 6 rebounds, but 0 for 3 from the field, 0 points as a senior in a
big game,
a legitimate home game. Your first sort of big-ish game as a senior in this program. You've been in here 4 years. I mean, that's hard to accept.
Yeah, not a good sign moving forward, to say the least. Jump right ahead. Go ahead.
He's the same enigmatic guy that we've seen for three plus years. He'll go for 20 and 12, and then he'll go for 0 points and 5 rebounds. You just don't know.
Well, let's look at our second big topic, and I guess the big question that everybody's asking themselves, and that I ask is this still the team that we thought they were? Because I thought that they were an underrated team with every bit the potential to get back to the Final Four and maybe beyond. A team that was going to get better as the year went on. And personally, I still think it is that team. I just think we've been down this road before. I mean, last year's team is like the perfect example. They struggled to make the tournament, and then they go to the Final Four. But the improvement as the year goes on is kind of a hallmark of all Boeheim's teams, and he says it over and over again. We got to get better, and a lot of coaches say that. That's coach speak. But, this is a totally revamped roster, and there's no doubt that there's tons of talent on there, but people still got to find their roles, and they need to learn to play the zone defense the way Boeheim wants them to, and they need to learn to be more effective, obviously, offensively. But are these things that are going to come along, and is this team the team that we thought they were? Ultimately, will they be?
I think there's one thing that we learned by talking about this team over the course of the last several years we've been doing this podcast. We probably make a lot more out of the first couple of games against mid-majors.
Yep.
We should. And we probably make more out of a bad loss like this than we should. I think we tend to overreact a little bit. So I'm not sure I want to overreact necessarily on the basis of this one game. They showed a lot of good. I mean, you don't score 100 points against a Division I team unless you know how to put the ball in the basket. And this team does. This team has to learn how to react when things don't go the way that they initially want them to go. And that comes with experience. That comes with playing together. And there's a lot of guys that are new to Jim Boeheim's program. And there's a lot of guys that have to understand what plan B looks like. They haven't had to resort to a plan B. That was a challenge in this game. They got down 6-0, and they could never get it back. And I don't know if, again, the competition was harder, but they struggled to move without the basketball. There's a lot of standing around. We saw that a lot last year, and I have a bad sense that this team, if the shots aren't falling, they just want to keep shooting rather than doing something different. Tyler Lydon, give him credit. He was the one guy, and he's got that potential to be the inside-out guy that this team desperately needs when shots aren't falling. And his shot was falling, but he was also able to attack the rim. Andrew White didn't do anything but want to just spot up and shoot threes. Tyus Battle was non-existent. We wanted him to be the Malachi Richardson. He wasn't. He barely made his presence felt at all in this game. And so and Tyler Roberson, we've talked about him, he can't create his own shot, really. So are they who we thought they were? I don't think they're as bad as they might have seemed against South Carolina. I don't think they were probably as good as we probably made them out to be playing Canisius and Holy Cross and South Carolina State.
Yeah.
They're somewhere in the middle of all that, which puts them at 18 to 25 ranked team. That's probably right.
Yeah, I think that's where they probably are right now. But I still believe that they will ultimately be who we hope they will be. Tyus Battle's a good example. Malachi Richardson didn't do too much until the NCAA tournament when he really blossomed, and he would still be on this team if it wasn't for that late run that he did. So I think Tyus Battle will show improvement the way Malachi Richardson did, and we know what we got with Tyler Lydon, and I think that our new guys in White and Guillen, they're both grad students. They're fifth-year seniors. They know how to respond to adversity. And so I think that the leadership's there, and I think the talent's there. The same talent that was there before this South Carolina game is there. The only thing that really has me questioning things is the inside play on both ends. And so that takes us to the third big question or topic of the night, and who's going to score inside for this team? We'd like to think Roberson would, and you'd like to think Coleman would provide some inside scoring. We don't expect much from Chikwu, but Brad, who can we even count on to score inside the paint? Because we were outscored 30-8 by South Carolina, 8 points in the paint for Syracuse in a whole basketball game. I mean, that's just unacceptable.
Well, this team had 8 2-point baskets in the entire basketball game.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I know.
8 2-point baskets in an entire college basketball game. That's egregious. I don't understand how any team that calls themselves a national championship caliber team can score 8 2-point baskets in any one game.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, it comes down to interior play. You know, the mid-range jumper's gone away in college basketball, unless your name's Tyler Robertson, but he can't make it either. But anybody that wants to contend, they've got to have an inside-out game. I don't know. Dajuan Coleman plays 15 minutes a game. His 15, it's almost like the coaches are keeping this stat, and they say, oh, he's played his 15 minutes. Now he's done for the night. He played 15 minutes again last night.
Yeah, it's like
that's all he's got. I don't get that.
It's like they got him on a
Everybody says he's healthy.
leash.
Everybody says his knee's fine. His stamina's good. It's just been as good as it's ever been. And he plays 15 minutes a game. He's the guy that could produce. He was a New York State Player of the Year. He got recruited by John Calipari. The guy can play basketball. His low post game. He's as strong as an ox. He can make shots with both hands. You got to be able to utilize him as an interior presence offensively. But if he's only playing 15 minutes a game, what are you going to do? And then Torian Thompson can be that guy, but he's making freshman mistakes, and he's got range and he can extend, and that's good. I don't see as much on the blocks from him yet. He's a little bit sort of wiry and needs to fill out a little bit probably, but he's got the size to be able to score inside. Chukwu's he's as much of a project as Baikita was as a freshman, and Baikita at least brought the energy.
Yeah,
I don't know what we're getting with him really. That's he's going to be more of an enigma than Roberson's been, I'm afraid.
And Coleman is an enigma in himself, like you said. He was one of the highest rated recruits that we've had in recent memory, and of course the injuries held him back. But he's supposed to be healthy now, and he's a fifth-year senior too, and we really need more. I think he's going to have to be the answer. And whether he's on some sort of a pitch count, with Boeheim and the staff early in the season.
That's what it feels like. It does.
But we'd like to hope that, he can play more minutes because, going into the year, I was secretly hoping Chukwu was going to get all the minutes and he was going to be this dominant defensive center and, provide just enough offense. And, that doesn't look like that's going to be the case, so we really need Coleman to step up, and I think he can. Maybe more minutes will come. I don't think that his limited minutes are a fatigue issue. Maybe it is, but he's the guy with the most potential to provide us that inside scoring, along with Roberson, which we got to expect him. He's going to have to average 14 points a game, 12, 14 points a game in his senior campaign, and so I hope that he can deliver that, but a lot of that will complement. Like if Coleman can score a little, things should open up for Roberson. Maybe we see more Tyler Lydon at center, in the center of that zone in some of these big games, as we did last year. Maybe that's the answer for the Syracuse team is Tyler Lydon as our center.
Well, and I think that would have helped last night if they could have done that. But the problem is he was the only guy making outside shots, and you needed that to be able to open up anything on offense. When White's not hitting, when Battle's not hitting, when Gillen and Howard aren't hitting, and Lydon is, well, then Lydon's going to be the guy that opens up the defense, and then he's stuck outside and he can't bang inside, and then you become entirely perimeter-oriented.
Well, let's now look at the other side. Defensively, as much as South Carolina got the ball inside, Syracuse didn't get many block shots at all, and that's just a sign that we're not playing the zone correctly, or particularly our centers aren't. Syracuse entered the game averaging 8 blocks a game through the first 4 games. They only blocked 2 of South Carolina's shots, and just like on the offensive side, who's going to shore up the middle of that zone? We don't have an answer yet now after 5 games. This was a first real test for those centers, and they failed. So is it Coleman? Is it Chukwu? Or is Lydon the best option? But who's going to man the center of that zone once we get in? We're going to Wisconsin Tuesday. Who's going to hold it down? Any idea? You still with me? Yeah, it looks like we might have lost Brad there. Oh, no, there he is.
I think Leiden's got to be. Chukwu, he's a project defensively as much as he is offensively. He can block a shot when they come down on a fast break, but that's about the extent of it, I think. He's not always in position. Roberson should be in there being physical and defending, and I think generally he is. But, yeah, I don't think he's as much of a shot blocker as we'd like to think he is. Leiden's good for a couple of block shots. He didn't have any against South Carolina. I don't know. I mean, between Coleman should be that guy too. Now he can play without fouling. That was a problem with his early in his career. Is he get in foul trouble? We don't see that anymore, probably because he's only playing 15 minutes a game. But I think they've got the guys that can do it. I think they're struggling to play together, play as a unit in that zone. I think there's too many. I'd say there's too many new parts, but you've got Coleman, you've got Roberson, you've got Leiden who've been in the program. Chuck was really the only interior guy other than Thompson.
Even he's been here for a year.
So I don't know. That could be a real challenge for this team, especially when you're going up against some big guys in conference play. That's probably where the biggest challenge for this team is. I think. I don't see any answers. It's just the guys they've got have just got to be stronger.
They got to get better. We've been here before with the Boeheim post-game press conference and saying this guy's got to get better, that guy's got to get better, and more often than not, they do get better. So that's the only thing we can do is keep our fingers crossed and hope we see some improvement on both sides of the court in that center position. Again, I'm an optimist, especially when it comes to Syracuse basketball. I think that they'll figure it out. I just don't know exactly who's going to be the guy to step up. You really pull for a guy like Coleman after all he's been through, and if it doesn't come through for him, then boy, what a disappointment his entire career at Syracuse was. So I'd like to think for a better ending there. And Chukwu's going to be with us for a couple more years, just in his sophomore campaign at this point. So you hope that he improves because he's going to be a long-term solution at center for us, hopefully. And so there's a few options for this to work out. I kind of wish we were playing North Florida before Wisconsin next week, but Wisconsin's next, in 48 hours.
So they don't have a lot of time to work out the kinks, do they?
So we'll see what happens when they head down to Madison, which brings us to the fifth big topic, and is this going to be a similar outcome in Wisconsin? Are we going to get drubbed? Are we going to have trouble scoring? I mean, it's funny. In Boeheim's post-game presser, somebody asked him if some of these new guys were kind of intimidated by the atmosphere of the big game in the Barclays. And Boeheim was like, look, if there was orange shirts everywhere in the crowd, it's going to be nothing like the atmosphere in Madison, which is going to be a total it's going to be intense. So if they were rattled by the stage at the Barclays, just wait till the ACC Big Ten Challenge in Madison on Tuesday. But, what are your thoughts on the Wisconsin game? Because let's face it, if they had beat South Carolina, even in a close game, we'd probably feel pretty confident that we could give it a shot. But it's hard to feel confident heading into Wisconsin now.
Yeah, I don't think – I mean – we talked about the offense. We talked about the defense. I don't think the defense against South Carolina was terrible.
Yeah.
There were some things they could have done better, especially on the inside. But there were a lot of possessions that South Carolina really just had no idea, and they were launching something at the shot clock buzzer. So I think that they can create enough havoc at the top of that zone that maybe you can hide some of the weaknesses you've got on the back line, at least for the most part. I think where this team, their bread and butter is like it or not, is going to be shooting the basketball and what can the guards do to get other guys involved. And we haven't talked much at all so far tonight about what the guards were able to do or not able to do against South Carolina. And Howard and Gillen. I mean, Gillen, I don't think – he may not have scored. I don't think – he had a three-pointer. Howard, he had 10 points, but and and he knocked down a three, got to the line a couple times, but neither of those guys. I think they against some of the lesser teams, they were able to get in the lane and make things happen. They were able to draw a defender, and not necessarily kick it out for three, but it would free up a big guy for an easy dump down or an alley-oop or something like that. And that was not the case at the Barclays against South Carolina. And part of it was they were getting a little bit too deep. Like Gillen would attack and he'd get too deep and then he'd get stuck. And I mean, he's only 6 foot. And, we've seen in a lot of occasions so far this year where he could launch up a floater or wiggle something through and get a shot off or at least find somebody. And that just wasn't there. And I think the way those guys run the offense, they were a little bit too hectic, I thought. Maybe they just weren't as patient enough with trying to get open guys or being able to look. And I think maybe they just relied on the kick out a little too much. And so maybe if they can just attack it a little bit differently on Tuesday night, just be able to, I don't know, and telling them to slow it down in an atmosphere like that. Now, Wisconsin plays at a slow pace, and South Carolina played at a faster pace. So maybe that plays into Syracuse's hands a little bit, with being able to drive a little bit more patience with it. But I think Howard and Gillen have to play better because, like I said, I've said that the last couple of weeks. They're the engine that drives this team. I don't think it's Andrew White. I don't think it's Roberson. I don't really think it's Leiden. You need excellent point guard play for this team to get to where it wants to go. And I think we had a little bit below average point guard play the other night, whereas we had outstanding point guard play for the first 4 games.
Yeah, I think that you mentioned the more plodding pace that Wisconsin likes to play at. I think that'll help us stay in this ball game. Andrew White's been in the Big Ten, right? So he knows what that team is going to be like in Madison, although I bet you they'll turn out with a little more fervor for Syracuse than they did for Nebraska. But it's I'm going to, wipe the slate clean, count South Carolina as a wake-up call, see if they come with a little more intensity, a little more intensity, a little more confidence maybe in Wisconsin, and we'll see what happens. I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a big stage, on the bigger stage than it was at the Barclays on a Saturday, up against the Ohio State-Michigan football game and everything. It's going to be one of the main events on Tuesday night in the world of college basketball as part of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. So I got my fingers crossed. I think we're going to keep the game close, and we might be able to steal one, like they stole one from us at the Dome last year. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's 25 teams in this country right now that are undefeated. Syracuse isn't one of them, but South Carolina is. I don't think they're a terrible team. They haven't had great success lately, but Frank
I don't
Howard
think that's a terrible loss. So I don't know as if we need to be all doom and gloom after that. Wisconsin's lost twice. Carolina beat them pretty badly. They lost to Creighton, and I don't see too many great wins on their schedule. They beat Georgetown pretty handily, but Arkansas State did too. So,
right.
I don't think that. This. I don't think you're running up into the Final Four team from 2 years ago that Wisconsin had with Kaminsky and those guys.
Right.
That's not the same team. So I think, if Syracuse does what they did in the first 4 games, they're able to move the basketball, they're able to knock down shots, they're able to get in the lane, they're able to get the big guys involved. I'm confident.
Yep. I feel the same way, but also now a little concerned that we could be 4-2 after Tuesday night, which would put us on kind of the outside looking in, put us back on the bubble place we've been recently, and it's just not much fun. Always worrying. Every game feels like it's a must-win to get on the good side of the NCAA committee. So this is a big opportunity to put a good win on our schedule, on our resume in Wisconsin. I don't think it is a make or break for the season or anything like that. It's so early still, and I think that even starting 4-2, we got plenty of opportunities to pick up wins over the next month and during the ACC conference play as this team hopefully gets better. So I'm looking forward to it, but it won't be if they should lose, I still will have a ton of faith in this team. But I guess it'll be more than if they win or lose, just how they look, Yeah,
so, agree. Yeah, we're going to learn a lot when we watch this game, similar to what we just learned when we saw them against South Carolina. Every time we see them against a good opponent, we're going to learn a lot about this team. We don't learn a lot when we watch them beat South Carolina State and Colgate and those guys. We don't learn much at all. We learn a lot seeing how they handle adversity, seeing who steps up, seeing who shrinks, seeing who makes freshman mistakes and who overcomes it. I think that we'll see a lot out of this team, and hopefully better. I mean, you're right. You said it. That was a wake up call. That was a learning experience for this team, and every coach will admit, publicly or not publicly, they like that early loss.
Yeah,
it helps. It helps create some coachable opportunities for those guys to learn from.
Yeah. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that college basketball is just crazy. You're out there for 40 minutes. Every game's different. Guys are hot, guys are cold. That South Carolina team needed overtime to beat Monmouth, the team that we handled easily. So, it doesn't make sense. But a lot of it is matchups, and that South Carolina team was obviously a really bad matchup for us.
They played zone. Syracuse. One thing they say is teams that play zone don't like to be zoned. Right. I've heard that dozens of times. I can't really put my finger on why that's true. But when South Carolina went to a zone and Syracuse just stood outside and tried to launch 3-pointers over top of it, they struggled. That was a difficult matchup, and there's I'm sure some coaches that are making some notes of that, and hopefully that was a one-time thing with the shooting that we didn't see yesterday that will rectify itself if other teams try and go zone on Syracuse.
Well, it's always a lot of interesting stuff to talk about after a loss, although it's not as much fun, than talking about how great they are. But so let's have some fun right now with this week's edition of Connor's Corner Trivia. What do you have for us?
So we talked about shooting, and that's going to be the either the bread and butter or the Achilles heel of this team, I think, as we move forward. So it got me thinking about shooting and some of the great shooting teams that Syracuse has had, at least in the Boeheim era. So I was looking back at the year-by-year statistics and wanted to see if you could tell me what the best shooting Syracuse team was in the Boeheim era.
Jeez.
And even if you can pinpoint just an era, just a group of guys, because this is obviously hard to pick out a year, one out of 40.
Well, I think that the Andy Rauten's team shot pretty good, but I really am going to go back to those the mid '80s. The Pearl Washington and the Final Four team when Derek Coleman was a freshman, mainly because I think that Final Four team was the first year of the three-pointer. So back in those days, the shooting percentages, I think, were just naturally higher because teams were running more sets to get layups and short mid-range jumpers, and there wasn't as much hoisting of threes because the three-point line didn't exist. So I'm going to go back in that era and say it was in the 80s, the mid to early 80s.
That's a good call. That's so some of the best shooting teams in the history of this program were, or at least in the Boeheim era, were in that time frame. With the best, the team with the best were not mid 80s, but rather it was the team in 1988-89.
Okay.
So if you remember, that team was 2 years after Final Four team.
Yeah, Billy Owens, Derek Coleman.
Owens was on that team. Coleman was still there. Sherman Douglas was running point. You had Dave Johnson on that team.
Stevie Thompson still or no?
Stevie Thompson was on that team. So when you think about that team, so that's the best shooting team in Syracuse history. Who was the best shooter on that team, field goal percentage?
Oh, boy. It has to be Coleman because he was just dunking so many of them. I'm going to go with DC.
Not a bad guess. He was second highest on that team, but incorrect.
Oh, so and Owens was pretty efficient. Billy Owens, but man,
no, incorrect. Billy Owens was a freshman, so hard to expect a freshman to be a great shooter. Or at least hard to expect a freshman to always make a shot selection.
It was Stevie Thompson. He wasn't good from the free throw line, but he shot a high percentage everywhere else, right?
It was Stevie Thompson, correct. And that's hard, because when I looked that up, I thought that same thing. I was like, man, that guy was not a good shooter at all.
Yeah.
But he actually was. And a large percentage of his field goal attempts were dunks and inside, even though he was listed, I think, at 6'4", but he was probably not more than 6'2".
One of the greatest memories of Stevie Thompson and Sherman Douglas was the year following the national championship loss to Indiana in Madison Square Garden, when Sherman got the ball just short of midcourt and then hiked it football style underneath his legs to Stevie. A perfect pass to Thompson, who dunked it. I mean, that was awesome. Sherman Douglas was awesome. I mean, maybe, when you talk about your favorite Syracuse basketball players of all time, I think that Sherman Douglas gets lost in the shuffle. But I think if you think about it, Sherman Douglas might be number one on my list. He might be number one. He was just so great to watch, and he had a long NBA career.
Right. Probably as long as any Syracuse players had, really.
Yeah, and certainly.
Think about it. Until Carmelo's come along.
Pound for pound, one of the best Syracuse basketball players ever, Sherman Douglas.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was probably listed as 6'2", but he was another guy who's probably not more than 6 foot.
Attitude. He had that chip on his shoulder because he wanted to go to Georgetown. They didn't recruit him, so he came to Syracuse, and where he beat Georgetown. And, that's awesome. I can picture that between the leg pass to Stevie Thompson like it happened yesterday.
I can even picture Stevie Thompson's dunk. He had his legs all spread. And
it was fun. It was fun to. It was fun.
All right, so on that team, Stevie Thompson, he shot 64% from the field for the season, which is crazy.
That is crazy.
20 guys shoot 64% from the field at any position on any team in the year 2017.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. I mean, again, and there was a 3-point line at that point. Stevie didn't take many.
No, he didn't.
But yeah, Stevie Thompson, another guy who a little unorthodox look to his entire game, but man, what a great player.
Yeah, he shot 21 threes that whole year.
Wow, I'm surprised he shot that many because I can't see.
And he was 6 for 21, so 28% from three. No, he was not an outside shooter. And at the line, he was less than 50%. He was 49.7.
Oh, I know. It was painful.
Yeah,
watching him shoot free throws.
But that was a great shooting team. You had Matt Rowe on that team, who was one of the great outside shooters that this team has seen
before transferring to Maryland.
Yeah, shot almost 50% from three that year. Matt Rowe. So that was a great shooting team. That was number one in the history of this program. And what I found interesting was, out of the top 10 shooting teams in the history of this, in Boeheim's history, 6 of this top 10 came before the advent of the three-point line. Okay. Which sort of makes sense. Because once the three-point line went in, you said you had more guys taking it. Early on, you made a good point. They weren't taking a lot of threes. You just had legitimate shooters that were taking threes. Everybody else, it was just sort of once in a while. You didn't have, guys that just didn't belong launching 5 or 6 threes a night.
Right. Yeah.
So if you think about the post-1986, which was the advent of the three-point line, the top 3 field goal shooting teams were all in those first 3 years, 87, 89, then 88, then 87. Those are your best 3 shooting teams. Yes. And again, it was because you only had guys shooting threes that belonged shooting threes. Everybody else was trying to get mid-range and layups.
Yeah.
5 of the top 10 of those teams, of the best shooting teams, were in those first 5 years after the three-point line. So it just progressively got worse from there. So let me ask you this. What was the worst shooting team in the history of this program?
Oh, boy. It had to be the team of Terrence Roberts, Louis McCroskey, Darrell Watkins, Josh Wright might have been on that team. What year was that? That would have been...
You're talking 2007, probably?
Yeah, post-national championship. One of the teams that maybe McNamara's junior or senior year. I bet you it wasn't when Hakeem Warwick was still on the roster, but that Big East championship year that's been vacated by the NCAA, but what was it, 2006?
So that's not a bad guess. The 2006 year, which was McNamara's senior year, and then the year after when McNamara was gone, and it featured Nichols and McCroskey and Roberts and them. those were two of the top 10 worst shooting teams in the Boeheim era, but they ranked 8th and 10th worst.
Oh boy, could it have been? Well, I would assume then it would probably have been one of those teams that didn't make the tournament. 2007, 2008, maybe the year after, a couple years after McNamara was gone. The Johnny Flynn years with Paul Harris.
No, in fact, those were some of the best shooting teams.
Oh wow, well.
Yeah, so the 2008, 2009 were Johnny Flynn's years, and they were post 3-point. They were the 6th and 7th best shooting teams in the history of this program.
Oh, so that's about 20 seasons.
So ironically, those were unsuccessful teams collectively, but reasonably good shooting teams. I mean, Devendorf could shoot. Johnny Flynn obviously could shoot.
Right.
Paul Harris didn't do much other than spend a lot of time around the rim, so he was except for all his layups he missed in 6 overtimes, but
geez, yeah, this is a tough one. Maybe
you'll be surprised when I tell you.
Damone Brown, was it a Damone Brown team?
Damone Brown team. That would have been 98 through 2001 roughly.
Yeah.
Those are some bad shooting teams. Yeah, so 98 and 2001 were 4th and 6th worst in Boeheim era. So some pretty bad shooting teams then too. So that's good. But they made the tournament most of those years.
It seemed like some point along the way that this Syracuse program went from being this high flying up and down the court, fast breaking offense to this more Wisconsin style prodding defense. Yep. Half court, we stop them, then we get the ball and we struggle. And it seems that at that same point that our defense got really good. That's when we started struggling to score. And so I'm going to say that it was the Michael Carter Williams teams. Maybe hit Michael Carter Williams' freshman year, or even the sophomore year as well. It might have been some of the worst shooting teams percentage-wise.
Carter Williams' freshman year was 2012. 2013 was a Final Four team that he was a point guard on. That 2013 team was the top 10 worst shooting team.
And they went to the Final Four.
Yeah, they got to the Final Four, being one of the worst shooting teams. And I had the stats, but I didn't actually.
But the best defensive team of all time.
Yeah, that's what I'm scanning right now, real quick. I think they had the best opponents' field goal shooting percentage, or lowest rather. They gave up 37% field goal shooting. So that was one of the best defensive teams we'll probably ever see. Mm-hmm. But you're right, and we've talked about that. I remember talking about that last season. That the more they recruit guys that fit into that zone, those guys aren't necessarily shooters. And that's, you other than the last couple of years when they've gone very much the one and done route, Duke had always recruited shooters.
Right.
You always knew you were going to have 3 or 4 guys that were just going to just knock down threes exclusively. They recruited a different style player.
Yeah.
And Syracuse has been fortunate to have a couple of shooters recently, but we always thought that Cooney was going to be a shooter, and he wasn't. I mean, he kind of was, but
percentage-wise,
really.
No.
Yeah. Andy Rollins was a great shooter. James Southern was a great shooter. Going prior to that, a guy like Marius Ulis was a great shooter. But they're kind of one-offs rather than a plethora of these guys that a lot of those programs have.
Yeah.
We kind of luck into some great shooters, I think, occasionally.
Well, and we're also trying to recruit bigger guards, longer guys.
Right.
Not necessarily, those guys don't necessarily make the greatest shooters.
Frank Howard didn't come in this program as a shooter. He came in as a 6'5" point guard, and that's exactly why he came in, to man the top of that zone and a guy who can handle and distribute. But he didn't come in as a shooter. Hopefully he can turn into one. He's, by all accounts, starting to do so.
Yeah.
Carter Williams was never a shooter, never claimed to be, never even tried to be.
No. He's an assist and steal guy. Yeah, assist and steal guy.
Those guys to go around.
Yeah, that's really interesting to correlate the shooting percentages to those styles of play that these teams have had. But yeah, it's like, even the Johnny Flynn years they were still like up and down and fast breaking and somewhere along the line, Boeheim decided that they were gonna. Once he like perfected that 2-3 zone, I guess, and started recruiting for it. All of a sudden, Syracuse became it's difficult to watch at times. It's like it's why because the defense got so good did the shooting need to get so bad? It doesn't make sense.
Guys can either do one or the other, it seems.
Yeah. But
so I'll answer the question for you. The worst shooting team in the history of Jim Boeheim led Syracuse basketball was last season.
Yeah.
Final Four team. Yeah. It almost didn't make the tournament, but it was a Final Four team.
Yeah, I guess when you look at that season as a whole, it was a tough regular season.
It was. Absolutely. Think of how many just 50-point struggles that team had with teams like Clemson and Virginia Tech.
Oh, man.
I mean, teams had no business.
I was at the Dome for that Clemson game that went into overtime last year, and it was one of the most frustrating games I've ever been to because you just couldn't, that team at that point couldn't afford to lose at home to the likes of Clemson, and we just gave that away, and even when it went to overtime, you thought, okay, now they're going to get it together, and boy, I remember sitting in the Dome and just being beside myself. So, but yeah, last year's team, Final Four team,
shot 42.5% from the field for the season, and that includes games like Colgate and Holy Cross and teams that they're probably shooting over 50% against.
I assume it also.
When you had Cooney going 7 for 20 in games,
Yeah, we used to talk about that. Last year we talked about it. So many
launched threes on that team. Mm-hmm. The more I think the teams feature a 3-point shot, the worse your field goal shooting is going to get.
Yeah, and that's what Boeheim said going into this year. We're going to shoot more threes than any Syracuse team ever has shot. Right. But that percentage also, I assume, includes the Gonzaga game and the Virginia game where they, obviously shot it really well, at least in the second half.
Now, I will tell you, so before the South Carolina game, in the first 4 games, again, against substandard competition, they were shooting 52.4%. If they could do that for a whole season, it would put them in the top 10 ever.
Yeah.
So what we were witnessing over the first 4 games was, in some ways, an aberration with this program.
Yeah. Although we'd like to think that, when we see all these guys, that, that's how they are. But the defensive effort that South Carolina brought shows that they're not going to shoot like that when the other team, is making such a concerted effort defensively. So, and we're going to see a lot more of those types of teams, going forward, starting with Tuesday night against Wisconsin. So, yeah, that's a pretty good question tonight, Brad. That I don't know how you come up with all this stuff from week to week and year to year, but that's a typical Great Connor's Corner trivia question that it both brings back memories of some former players like Stevie Thompson and Sherman Douglas, and also it kind of exposes, I guess, a little bit of how Boeheim's program has changed over the years.
Very much so.
So good job.
Yeah, people want to say Boeheim's kind of he's stuck in his ways and he's old school and all that, but this program has evolved significantly. If you paid attention, you can see how much this thing has changed over 40 years. Yeah,
and you know what? 2 Final Fours in the past 4 years, and we were only eligible for 3 of those 4 years.
Yep.
And you got an Elite 8, so we went to the Elite 8 3 of the last 5 years, and ineligible for one of those years. So he's been to the Elite 8 3 of the last 4 years that Syracuse was eligible for the NCAA tournament. I mean,
Sweet 16s 5 of the last 7 times they've been eligible.
Yeah, so the evolution of Boeheim, he's the biggest basketball junkie. Basketball obviously is his life, and so this isn't just a coincidence. He's refined his recruiting, his game planning, and his coaching to adapt to the changing times, and it's obviously he's had great success as of late. Great success.
And I think too, as he focuses on the zone defense, I say what you will about college basketball, and you and I love college basketball more so than the NBA. We wouldn't be talking about it right now if we didn't. But it's less of a game now than it was.
Yeah.
And there's less talent to go over. There's less talent because a lot of the most talented guys go, one and done, or at least 2 years and out and into the NBA. And he recognizes that kids aren't able to shoot consistently in college basketball to the same degree as they used to. But yet again, the AAU culture has changed it such that you've got guys that probably shouldn't have as green a light from outside that tend to think that they should be shooting. So if you can focus on a defense that encourages outside shooting but questionable shot selection, you got a pretty good chance of being successful in today's game. And I think that's where his head is. And because he's such a student of the game and he's seen the trends and seen the evolution of the average college basketball player and the average college basketball team, he's clearly onto something, and the more teams that you see play zone that you never would have expected would have played zone, think of Duke. The more you realize that he's a lot more ahead of his time than people give him credit for.
Yeah. I think that some of us up here in Orange Nation really appreciate that, but still, to this day, a lot of people, even Syracuse fans, don't give Boeheim the full credit that he deserves. And when I was talking about it tonight at a family party about those vacated wins and how Boeheim would be closing in at 1,000. He'd be 12 wins away from 1,000 right now if those wins weren't vacated. And why isn't Syracuse pushing back? Why, like, Notre Dame had wins vacated this past week, and their first talk was, statement by Brian Kelly was that, we're going to contest this. It's crap that they're vacating these wins. Syracuse is just sitting there and taking it, and it just feels the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And why isn't Syracuse trying to get these wins back on the record? It's so stupid. The teams they beat still have losses. Jerry McNamara still has the trophy from the Big East Championship in 2006, and Penn State had wins reinstated that were vacated through that whole Joe Paterno scandal. Can you explain why? Do you have any ideas why we're not trying to get those wins back, or maybe we are behind the scenes?
I mean, maybe we are behind the scenes. My guess, a couple things. One, the way that investigation went on for 10 years, and it was so exhausting for, I'm sure, everyone involved that it's not even worth fighting anymore.
Yeah.
And I think, too, you've had such a turnover in the administration. You went from, Dr. Gross to Mark Coyle, who was barely even there, to John Wildhack. I don't think that, based on that lack of continuity, I'm not sure they would even know where to start in terms of fighting it. So I think it's probably easier just to move forward.
Yeah, throw your hands up in the air, but that's totally unfair to Jim Boeheim, who should be second behind Mike Krzyzewski.
But he should be closing in on his 1,000th win here in the next couple of weeks, which would be an enormous cause for celebration. And now we're not allowed to celebrate that.
Yeah, I think we will internally, up at Syracuse, but it's just disappointing, and it's a double standard when you look at the penalties that Syracuse was penalized for, the infractions that Syracuse was penalized for. It's just the punishment does not even come close to fitting the crime. And then you watch a guy like Coach K just get lauded continuously over and over again for his greatness. And, there's skeletons in that closet too, whether it's the Corey Maggette situation or it's just a double standard, and I'm sick of it. And I think part of it was brought on by Boeheim himself because of his attitude towards the NCAA over the years. But his attitude towards the NCAA shouldn't really affect the way they legislate. And
it shouldn't, but it's not a jury of their peers. It's the NCAA's judge and jury, and they'll do what they want to do.
Yeah. Which
is unfortunate for all of us that love the game, but I think we all know the guys that are behind the curtain.
Yep. So, well, getting up here on 50 minutes into the show, time to look at the schedule ahead for Syracuse. This week, we've been talking about all show. Wisconsin, Tuesday night, 7:30. Imagine that's on ESPN, maybe ESPN too. It's obviously all the ACC Big Ten Challenge games are on ESPN Family of Networks, and that should be one of the marquee games on Tuesday night. 7:30 tip from Madison, Wisconsin. And then Saturday at 3 o'clock, or at 4 o'clock, it's North Florida coming to the Dome for a odd 4 o'clock tip on a Saturday. And the thing about this that's kind of weird is on Saturday, Finger Lakes 1 is live webcasting a college basketball tripleheader from Waterloo. And the first game is Newark versus Jamesville DeWitt. And on Jamesville DeWitt's roster is Buddy Boeheim. And that game tips at 4. And when we first knew that we were going to go do this game and this schedule was announced, my first impression, and probably a lot of people's first thought was, I wonder if Boeheim's going to be there to watch his son. Well, he's not. He's going to be at the Dome coaching against North Florida. But if anybody...
rather be watching his son against Newark.
Yeah, so anybody out there that does want to check out Buddy Boeheim, you can watch us. I don't think they'll be watching it live. They'll be watching Syracuse, North Florida, but you can watch it on demand on Finger Lakes 1. We're going to have that Newark-Jamesville DeWitt game, and you'll be able to check out Buddy Boeheim. His older son now that should still be on Jamesville DeWitt is actually playing in a prep school. But that's just a little interesting side note, I think. If you want to check out Buddy Boeheim, you can watch Finger Lakes 1 Sports, fingerlakes1.com, either live on Saturday or on demand after. So after that, looking ahead, it's Connecticut on Monday night, December 5th, at Madison Square Garden, 7 o'clock. Connecticut's struggles this season have been well documented early on, and that is more of a must-win game than I think this Wisconsin game is. Boston University on Saturday, December 10th. Georgetown 1 whole week later on Saturday, December 17th for a noon start in the Dome. And the students are going to be on break. Maybe a few of them will stick around, but it should be a big crowd for Georgetown. But without the students there and the band, it's going to be a different type of atmosphere than your average Syracuse-Georgetown meetup. And then they got Eastern Michigan, St. John's, and Cornell before they start the new season, the ACC schedule on January 1st, New Year's Day at Boston College. So that's the road ahead. And just a little something different here before we get out of here. Anybody checking like the score of the Syracuse game? That Syracuse basketball game on Saturday may have inadvertently on their like phone or whatever pulled up the Syracuse Pitt football game and just saw the score and thought, I didn't know we were playing Pitt in basketball. You see that Syracuse Pitt score?
Yeah, I can't admit to watch that. I was watching a basketball game instead. It was weird they played them both at the same time. But
yeah,
yeah, you didn't think that the football team would outscore the basketball team
ever.
Ever, let alone on the same day. Let
alone lose. The football they both lost. I mean, that was not a great day for Syracuse. Although it was fun to see the football team put up some points, especially without Eric Dungy healthy. But of course, this isn't a football podcast. But I've considered starting the Upstate Orange Football Podcast or something like that, but it's that college. I'm a college basketball guy, college football as much as I love Syracuse football. I don't like college football as a whole as much as I like college basketball as a whole, and part of that's maybe the season too. In the winter, not as much to do around here. I spent much of September and October playing golf still on Saturday afternoons, not watching, SEC football or even ACC football. But
that's part of the reason why I think they've got attendance struggles on the football side, but not on the basketball side. Nothing else to do in the winter.
Yeah, I agree with it. And you're going to want to, on a nice 75-degree day in September, you're going to want to go inside to the Dome where it's really hot and stuffy. So another backdrop to everything going on with Syracuse is these Dome renovations that are impending. and how that's going to affect football and basketball. It's going to be a different look and feel in there. They've released a lot of the plans, but still the timeline for when this is going to happen has been unclear. And they talk about being able to start it as soon as the basketball season ends and having it ready by our first home football game. But that seems pretty aggressive. But it's been pretty hush over the past few months about that. It was big news in the summer.
Well, they tried to make it hush in the summer too, but I think there were some leaks that shouldn't have been, and they were forced to talk about it.
So yeah,
I'll tell you what, I will be excited about that. We're not going to talk too much about the renovations yet, but one of the things they're talking about is making the dome surface sort of a more transparent surface, kind of like the Minnesota Vikings stadium,
roof,
which almost looks like you're outside even though you're not. And some of my favorite experiences in the dome were during day games when it's just so bright in there.
It's a different feel.
It's almost like you are playing outside, and it's an entirely different experience being in there during a day game than in a night game.
Yeah, the dome is just bright white. The roof is bright white behind those lights shining down, where at night the lights, it's just it's grayish, darker. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, I
look forward to what that new surface will do to even brighten it even further, and maybe they'll have even more home games on weekends in the wintertime.
Yeah. Well,
or during day games rather.
Yeah. So nice talking Cuse Hoops with you for an hour. Apologize to our listeners and viewers for the little connectivity issues early on in the show, but it wasn't that bad. Tuesday night, it's going to be fun. Go get home from work, get ready, 7:30 tip, Big Ten ACC challenge, and then we'll be back next Sunday night, to talk all about it. And we want to hear what you think. There was on last week's episode, Brad, I don't know if you saw it, but there was a really long comment where someone responded to our episode and touched on each of our Big Five topics, gave their own thoughts, and it was pretty insightful, and it was a good read. So if you want to check out last week's episode on the YouTube page of the episode, there's a really nice comment there where one of our listeners really took some time to break things down. And hey, if you want to do it again this week, whoever you are out there, you feel free, because I enjoyed reading it, and we definitely would look forward to any type of fan interaction.
Welcome it.
So you can email us at contact@fingerlakes1.com, contact@fingerlakes1.com, and you can tweet at us on Twitter @fingerlakes1, and of course comment on our video page on YouTube and like the video, like us on YouTube. So all right, Brad, time to get to sleep and get ready for another work week, huh? This isn't our full-time job. I know many people think that, geez, how are these big podcasts, but we have jobs, regular jobs. Mostly, yeah, when I'm not looking up trivia questions. So, all right, thanks for joining us on the Upstate Orange Podcast tonight. We hold on, get this set here. Yeah, thanks for joining us on the Upstate Orange Podcast. We'll be back again next Sunday. Check out the schedule at Finger Lakes 1 TV for the start time. Most likely it'll be 9 p.m. like it was this week, or just a little after 9. You can subscribe to our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or via RSS. We're online at www.fingerlakes1.tv/upstateorange. And so for the Professor Brad Connor, I'm Jim Sinacropi. Have a great week, and let's go Orange.